December 15th, 2025, 8:10 a.m., Novorossiysk Naval Base. This is the largest, most secure shelter of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. That morning, the port was immersed in its usual gray routine. The dock cranes turned slowly. Fuel tankers docked for routine refueling. However, Russian admirals had been on edge for months because Ukrainian drones and missiles had been bombing the port and its surroundings for days. Their eyes were constantly on the horizon, their radars on the sky. Everyone expected the danger to come from the air or the surface of the water. But at that moment, a pitch-black ghost, loaded with 500 kilograms of explosives, had already slipped through the steel nets at the harbor entrance. The Russian defenses heard no sound and saw no trace. Because this time, the threat was not coming from the air, but from the darkness 30 meters below the sea. Its target was a 3,000-ton, nuclear-capable steel monster. This was an impossible mission, a suicide dive, because this was Russia's most heavily guarded military headquarters after the Kremlin. But soon, this fortress would be torn apart by a vertical column of water. December 12th, midnight. Ukrainian military intelligence and engineers lowered a 6-meter-long cylindrical matte black object into the water with cranes. This was the TLK-400 Sub-Sea Baby, the most secret project Ukrainian intelligence had been working on. Resembling a simple torpedo in appearance, this device was actually an artificial intelligence-powered autonomous underwater assassin with a range of 1,200 kilometers. The distance between Odessa and the target, Novorossiysk, was 650 kilometers as the crow flies. However, the Russians had woven a steel net around the Crimean coast, the waters off Sevastopol, and the entrance to the Kerch Strait with Raptor-class patrol boats and Ka-27 anti-submarine helicopters. Going straight ahead would have been suicide. Therefore, the command center in Kiev drew a crazy 900-kilometer route on the map in the shape of a U. The moment its propeller started spinning, the drone left the coastline and began to trace a wide arc toward the deepest, most desolate, and most turbulent international waters of the Black Sea. To get out of range of Russian radars, it headed for the open waters where the sea was most turbulent. This was a gamble with no turning back, pushing its 1,200-kilometer range and battery life to the limit. 24 hours into the journey, the drone was moving at a speed of only 11 kilometers per hour, or at a human running pace, at a depth of 40 meters below the surface. This low speed was not a disadvantage, but rather its greatest shield. Because the drone's silent electric motor and composite body structure perfectly mimic the sonar signature of the dolphin pods or large fish commonly found in the Black Sea. When the powerful sonar waves sent from the surface by the Russian frigates hit the drone and bounced back, the operators saw only a biological creature on the screen, not a metallic threat. And they marked this signal as harmless and moved on. The Russians' technological arrogance prevented them from seeing this death-mimicking nature. By the 50th hour of the operation, the drone was passing 150 kilometers off the southern coast of Crimea, beyond Russian patrol lines. Here, the laws of physics once again came to Ukraine's rescue. The drone hid beneath the sharp boundary where the sea's warm and cold water layers meet, known as the thermocline layer. This layer refracts and reflects sonar waves from the surface like a mirror, rendering everything beneath it invisible. Under this natural thermal blanket, the TLK-400 moved like a ghost for the Russian ships on the surface, while operators in Kiev watched the dwindling battery level with fear. As it approached the waters off Novorossiysk, the drone performed its most dangerous maneuver. It ascended to periscope depth without surfacing. For just a few seconds, it received a final position update from the satellite via an encrypted burst signal and dove back into the depths. The battery level was approaching critical. There was no margin for error. After 3 days of darkness and solitary travel, the drone reached the entrance to the port of Novorossiysk at 7:30 a.m. on December 15th. This place was a veritable fortress. The entrances were blocked by floating barriers and underwater steel nets, with patrol boats darting about on the surface. Russian operators were scanning their screens for a Magura-type surface drone. Their perspective was horizontal. They did not anticipate the threat coming from vertical depths. However, The opportunity Ukraine had been waiting for arrived in the form of a massive 40,000-ton Russian cargo ship about to enter the port. The drone dove right into the middle of the immense noise and foamy water created by the giant ship's propeller. Russian sonars were completely blinded by this cacophony of noise. Hiding in the ship's shadow, the drone managed to slip into the port through the maintenance gap beneath the steel nets that were considered impassable. It was now inside. The main military pier of Novorossiysk. This was the heart of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. It was surrounded by gray warships. But the drone had a different target. The murky, oily water made its job easier. Gliding close to the bottom, the drone switched to cruise mode, with only about 12% of its energy remaining. It scanned the target profiles on its AI camera and found what it was looking for at Pier number 4. A 3,000-ton steel giant. A submarine of the NATO codenamed Improved Kilo, Project 636.3 class. The world's quietest diesel-electric submarine, dubbed the Black Hole by Western intelligence. Right now, its engines were off, its generators silenced, its crew at morning muster. The Russians' perception of it being the safest harbor was so high that there was neither a torpedo net nor active sonar protection around the submarine. The submarine was sleeping defenseless and blind in its own home. 8:12. The drone exited loitering mode. It fed its last battery power to the propellers. The operator in Kiev entered the final and most critical command via satellite. The target was not the center of the hull, but the propeller shaft at the stern. Because these submarines had double hulls, hitting them from the side would only crush the outer shell. However, the point where the propeller shaft entered the hull, where the seals were located, was the ship's Achilles heel. A blow there would spell disaster. The pitch-black ghost silently headed for its target with its last ounce of energy. It positioned itself directly beneath the submarine's massive 7-bladed bronze propeller, 3 meters below the keel, and detonated. At that moment, the laws of physics went haywire underwater. When the 500-kilogram TNT equivalent warhead exploded, it created a massive super-hot gas bubble underwater. This bubble launched the submarine's stern, that 1,000-ton steel mass, upward like a toy. The propeller shaft instantly bent, the shaft bearing shattered, and the seals burst. A tenth of a second later, when that gas bubble collapsed under the pressure of the water, the submarine's stern lost its support and fell into the void. The surface of the water split, and tons of water shot into the sky like a geyser in a pure white column. This was the signature that the explosion had occurred not on the surface, but below the keel. The pier shook. The stern of the submarine sank into the water within seconds. Russia's $500 million strategic asset had been crippled in one fell swoop, in its safest berth, by Ukraine's $500,000 plastic drone, which mimicked a dolphin. This was no accident. This was the most daring, longest range, and quietest assassination in modern warfare history. That vertical column of water rising into the skies above Novorossiysk on the morning of December 15th did not just destroy a 3,000-ton metal hulk, it also shattered the Russian Federation's power projection in the Black Sea into atoms. They were also the moment when Russia's propaganda machine was caught red-handed. Immediately after the attack, the Russian Ministry of Defense made the expected statement, claiming that a surface drone had been destroyed and that the ships had not been damaged. As proof, they released a video of the submarine. However, there were two critical tricks in this video that did not escape the eyes of military analysts. First, the video had no date or timestamp. It was impossible to prove whether the footage was taken before or after the attack. Second, and most importantly, the camera angle only showed the bow and midsection of the submarine. The stern, propeller section, and steering system, which were claimed to have been damaged, were deliberately hidden outside the frame. Russia was trying to hide the truth, but physics does not lie. The vertical column of water in the footage was definitive proof that the explosion occurred below the keel, not on the surface. This Kilo-class submarine was Russia's most strategic, most dangerous conventional weapon. It was the invisible launch pad for those infamous Caliber cruise missiles that rained death on Ukraine's cities of Kiev, Lviv, and Odessa, as well as on power plants at night. Each Kilo could dive underwater undetected and surprise launch 4 Calibers. With this single attack, Russia lost its invisible hand, its strategic whip. But the real disaster lies hidden in the Russian Navy's ruthless mathematics of presence. At the start of the war, Russia's Black Sea Fleet had 4 operational Kilo-class submarines in its inventory. One, the Rostov-on-Don, had previously been hit by Storm Shadow missiles in the dry dock at Sevastopol and was scrapped. Now, with this shaft strike in Novorossiysk, another one is gone. The number of operational submarines remaining? Only 2. You might say, 2 submarines are still a force. But military logistics science works against Russia. There is an immutable 1/3 rule in submarine warfare. Only 1/3 of your fleet is ever ready for battle at any given time. One is in port undergoing heavy maintenance. One is resupplying, resting personnel, or training. Only one is at sea, on active duty at that moment. Applying this rule to the last 2 submarines Russia has left paints a nightmare scenario for the Kremlin. This is a mathematical bankruptcy. If that single active submarine also experiences a technical malfunction, which given the Russian Navy's maintenance standards is only a matter of time, Russia's underwater presence in the Black Sea will effectively and officially drop to 0. The second major destruction caused by this attack is psychological collapse. Russian admirals, while moving the fleet from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, believed that the geographical distance would protect them. "This is 600 kilometers away from the front line. This is safe," they said. However, the TLK-400's 1,200-kilometer range, its insidious route around Crimea, and its biomimicry, dolphin mimicry, capability sent a clear message to Russia. There is nowhere to hide, no port to take refuge in. For a sailor, the most terrifying scenario is not dying while fighting on the open sea. The most terrifying scenario is drowning in the world's most secure harbor, at your own dock, in your sleep. The explosion in Novorossiysk ingrained this paranoia into the bones of Russian sailors. Now every Russian ship, even in its own port, will experience the fear of, "What's under me?" while running its engines. Another dimension of the attack is the risk of an economic blockade. Novorossiysk is not just a military base. It is the largest gateway through which Russia and Kazakhstan export their oil to the world. 40% of Russia's oil exports by sea are carried out from this port. Ukraine's turning this port into a war zone threatens not only warships, but also billions of dollars worth of oil trade. The December 15th attack sent a message to international marine insurance companies that Novorossiysk is no longer a safe port. Increased insurance premiums and tankers' reluctance to enter the region will deal a much greater blow to Russia's oil revenues, which feed its war budget, than sinking submarines. And finally, the collapse of the safe harbor doctrine. Russia no longer has a backyard in the Black Sea where it can hide its ships. If they pull their ships to Abkhazia, there is no infrastructure. If they pull them to the Caspian, they are out of the war. The Russian Navy has become a collection of expensive targets, trapped in its own port, unable to move, just waiting to be hit. But a plastic, electric-powered drone costing $500,000 took a nuclear-capable $500 million war machine out of the game. This cost asymmetry, a 1-to-1,000 ratio, is a burden that the Russian economy and military industry cannot bear. On the morning of December 15th, Russia lost more than just a submarine. It buried the illusion of immunity in the Black Sea, the logistical future of its navy, and the safe harbor doctrine in the murky, oily waters of Novorossiysk. We look forward to your opinions, analyses, and predictions in the comments. To follow how the war is won not just on the battlefield, but through technology and intelligence moment by moment, subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next operation briefing. Stay on the trail of truth. Thank you for choosing us.